So about 5 years ago, um, my 25-year marriage ended, and I became single again. And after a brief but meaningful crush on the neighborhood grocer, that's another story. I decided I was going to give the universe a little room to play with, and I signed up for a senior online dating service called Silver Singles. Now, the last time I had joined a dating service was in the 1980s. So things had changed a bit. Back then, I don't think online had been invented yet, no. And so I would have to get in my car, go downtown, go to the Select Singles office, where I would look in this humongous album of potential dates with their pictures and their profiles. And I would select perhaps a few that looked interesting to me. And then the office manager would send out invitations to these people who would, if they were interested, get in their car, go downtown, and go to the singles office and look in this humongous album and look at who was looking at them. And then if they were interested, the office would set up a date. This process sometimes took weeks. Now, fast forward to the next century, and then some. Online dating is different. You just click on like, or you smile at them if you're interested, and it can take a matter of seconds to get a response, or hours, or days, or not at all. So unlike the 1980s, as I looked at the pool of men, it had changed somewhat, in fact, quite a lot. Now, they were so much older than they were. and I mean, a lot older. And instead of, for instance, a picture of a buff guy bungee jumping or crossing the finish line of a marathon or lifting weights in front of a mirror, you might get a picture of a guy holding up a fish or a golf club or a rack of antlers. It's Kentucky, right? Or one standing in front of a mirror in his bathroom without a shirt, which probably should have stayed on. So, and then there was this guy looking lovingly at a silver-haired woman who apparently was his deceased wife and who he still called the love of his life. Yeah. So I can't tell you how sad some of these profiles made me feel. Nevertheless, I persisted, and I even got a few local dates. The first one was with a retired mathematics professor, and he seemed like a pretty decent guy. We went for a walk in a park where there was a statue of a thinly clad, that's the word, woman, especially from the waist up. And I thought she looked pretty joyful. But he said about the statue that it was obscene. So I passed on him. So the next date was with a man who in his profile appeared to be in his 60s, which it turned out he was in his 80s. And yes, it happens. It happens. And then another man met me up in Cincinnati for lunch. Really lovely man. But he walked into the restaurant limping rather badly. And so we had a nice lunch and conversation, but the date continued in the emergency room, where apparently he had fractured his foot a few days before. And because of some neuropathy issues, he wasn't able to feel it and so didn't know it. So I sat by his hospital bed while he gave his complete medical history to the nurse, whereupon I decided, in all my wisdom, that I did not have to be a caregiver of someone I had just met. Thank you, please applaud for that, because it has taken me a lot of work to get to that place. So, So anyway, and it reminded me of a friend of mine who had said she dropped out of online dating as a senior because she said all these older guys are just looking for somebody to take care of. So, I take care of them. So regardless whether that's true or not, I'm an eternal optimist. And I decided to give the universe a little more room to work with. And so I expanded the radius of my search by 500 miles. And this led to some pretty interesting results. There was a gentleman from Minneapolis, for instance, who I started talking to. He was really intelligent. He was interesting. He was still engaged in his work in the financial world. And we talked a lot on the phone. So we decided we would try to find a place in between Minneapolis and Lexington to meet up. But the problem was that no matter how hard we tried, it never seemed like our schedules could be worked out, and particularly his, because he seemed very, very busy with his work. In fact, as I got to thinking about it, every time I talked with him, it seemed he was driving in his car to a meeting somewhere, right? And then every time I asked him how his day had gone, like what he had been doing during the day, the answer was always the same: working. So I've lived long enough to deduce that this man was a workaholic, and plus he lived a really far way, 500 miles to be exact. And so I decided that I was going to call it off. And not something that I was anxious to do, but I called him up. And I said, I have something that I want to talk to you about. And he said, great. He said, I've missed talking to you, and I'm really glad to hear you. I love to hear your voice. And it seemed like he wasn't in his car. Like I had his complete and undivided attention now, which unnerved me because I was feeling kind of upset about having to, break up with this guy who I had never really met in person. But so anyway, so I stalled, and this is how the conversation went. I said, well, where are you? And he said, well, funny thing, I'm in the hospital. And I said, oh my gosh, what's wrong? And he said, well, they say I'm having a heart attack. And I said, oh my gosh, you mean like you're having it now? And he said, well, yeah. And he said, but they gave me something for it, and I'm feeling a lot better. What was it that you wanted to tell me? Well, I'm thinking to myself, oh my gosh, like, I can't break up with this guy now while he's having a heart attack. I mean, who does that? So I said, well, apparently this is not a good time for you. Let's talk later. And he said, oh, no, this is fine. This is fine. You have my undivided attention. And I said, oh no, really? I think we really should talk later. And we went back and forth like this, and he was very persistent. And I said, finally, I told him that I could no longer do this. And so, yes, apparently, I am the kind of woman who breaks up with a man while he is having a heart attack. And it took me a lot of years to do that, too. So, and to be fair, to me, I did call him a few days later to check on how he was doing, to see if he was okay, and he was. I think he was driving his BMW to a meeting somewhere. Okay, so a few months later, I had about 2 weeks left on on my subscription to Silver Singles, and to be honest, I could not wait for it to end. But on New Year's Eve day, a guy from North Carolina smiled at me. Yeah, and he was cute. And his profile said that he's a writer, which I am. And get this, he believes in the power of story. And I do too. I mean, like my whole life's been about that. So I thought, well, what the heck? Now, I got to tell you, in AARP, you know the retirement magazine? Yeah, I know it well. I've known it for a long time, actually. They say that older folks have an easier time of letting go of what is no longer working, right? They call it catch and release. So, yeah. So this time, however, and I thought, well, you know, I'll take a chance. What the heck? You know, if it doesn't work out, I can always catch and release, right? I'm getting pretty good at it. I mean, for like I, you know, can do it with a guy who's having a heart attack. So I take a deep breath, and against my better judgment, I smile back. Now, 2 years later, I guess you could say, instead of catch and release, that we hooked each other and reeled each other in. 2.5 years later, we are no longer in a long-distance relationship. And in fact, we both know each other's complete medical histories. And we have also accompanied each other to the emergency room at least once each. Thank you very much. So, yeah. So even though neither of us were looking for a caregiver, we do care for each other a lot. And life is good. Thank you.